Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whenever you are. This is Daniel Botkin. I want to talk to you today about the fallen Sukkah of David, about Ezekiel's 2 sticks, about Joseph, about Hosea, about a whole bunch of things that all tie together that hopefully will help you to understand, if you are a believer, how you fit into God's plan for Israel. The fallen Sukkah of David, Sukkah, by the way, is the Hebrew word for booth, tabernacle, a flimsy shelter built of sticks. You maybe have heard of the festival called Sukkot. In the Bible, in the English, it's called the Feast of Booths, Feast of Tabernacles. But there's something called the fallen Sukkah of David that we read about in the book of Acts, which is where I'm going to start in Acts chapter 15. Now in Acts chapter 15, this was commonly called the Jerusalem Council. It's when the Messianic Jews got together to try and figure out what's going on with these Gentiles coming into this faith in our Messiah. What's God doing? Where do these Gentiles, how do they fit in? Because prior to this, as you read in the book of Acts, you would read that they were going preaching the gospel to the Jews only, Even though Yeshua said, go and make disciples of all nations, yet they're going to the Jews only. And then remember, Peter went to the house of Cornelius. They were filled with the Holy Spirit, spoke in tongues, prophesied, and it was obvious God was accepting them as full-fledged members without them going through this man-made conversion process that the rabbis had devised. But the apostles got together in Jerusalem in Acts chapter 15 to talk and discuss what is God doing, what's going on here. How do the Gentiles fit into the plan of God? And after they discussed it for a while, it says in verse 13, and after they had held their peace, James answered, saying, Men and brethren, hearken unto me. Simeon hath declared how God at the first did visit the Gentiles to take out of them a people for his name. And to this agree the words of the prophets as it is written. And here he quotes from the prophet Amos. After this I will return and will build again the Tabernacle of David, or in Hebrew, the Sukkah of David, which is fallen down. And I will build again the ruins thereof, and will set it up, that the residue of men might seek the Lord, and all the Gentiles, upon whom my name is called, saith the Lord, who doeth all these things. Known unto God are all his works from the beginning of the world. Wherefore my sentence is, James says, that we trouble not them which from among the Gentiles are turned to God, but that we write unto them that they abstain from pollutions of idols, and from fornication, and from things strangled, and from blood. Now, a lot of Gentile Christians, they read this, they say, now this is the only 4 parts of the Torah we need to do if we're Gentiles. We just have to stay away from idols, fornication, things strangled, and blood. Well, if that's true, then you don't have to honor your parents. If that's true, you can go out and steal. You can do all kinds of things. So obviously, that's not what he's saying. Why does he specify these 4 areas? Because in the Gentile world at that time, these things were acceptable to Gentiles. Idolatry, fornication, things strangled, blood. Gentiles had no morals about these things. They thought that was fine to do that stuff. So in effect, James is saying, make sure the Gentiles know from the very start, these things have to go. None of this, no more of this stuff. And then the very next verse clarifies it even more. He says, for Moses of old time hath in every city them that preach him, being read in the synagogues every Sabbath day. Well, what's reading the Torah, Moses, the Torah, in the synagogues every Sabbath, what's that have to do with Gentiles? Well, at this time in history, that's where the Gentiles were going every Sabbath. The Gentiles who were turning to the God of Israel, where do you think they were going to be on the Sabbath? They were going to be in the synagogue, and they were going to hear the Torah read. So if I could paraphrase James, he's saying, if the Gentiles want to turn to God, if they want to put their trust in our Messiah, tell them right away, these 4 things, no more of that. And the rest of the Torah they will learn as they come to the synagogue from Sabbath to Sabbath and learn the Torah. They will begin to do the rest of it as they learn it. But what I want to focus on here is what he said here about the fallen Tabernacle of David, where he quotes out of Amos's prophecy. Now keep in mind, this passage out of Amos about God says, I will return and build again the Tabernacle of David, which has fallen down. And he talks here about the Gentiles, that somehow the Gentiles are connected to the restoration of the fallen Tabernacle of David. And you know, I have asked Christian friends, I've said to them, tell me, what's James talking about here? What is the fallen Tabernacle of David? And how do Gentiles figure in to the restoration of the fallen Tabernacle of David. What is the fallen Tabernacle of David? And when I ask Christian friends that, you know what I usually get as a response? This. Just kind of a blank stare. Or I just get kind of a, well, maybe, they don't have a clue, they don't know. And that's sad because keep in mind, this is the passage that gave the apostles their understanding of where Gentiles fit in to the plan of God, and how the Gentiles, how it is that they fit into Israel, how it is that they fit into this whole thing. And yet the Gentile Christians are clueless about it. And so that's one reason I hope to clarify some things here. Now, to understand this, first let's go to Ezekiel chapter 37. Now, chapter 37 of Ezekiel is best known for the Valley of the Dry Bones. Everybody's familiar with that story. These bones, them dry bones, the old song. Everybody's familiar with, the foot bone connected to the ankle bone connected to the leg bone, and on and on and on. So we know about the Valley of Dry Bones. But keep in mind what the Lord told Ezekiel about that Valley of Dry Bones. He said to him, after he tells him to prophesy to them, he says in verse 11, he says, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. These bones are the whole house of Israel. Now, by the whole house of Israel, he's talking not just about the Jewish people only, because the Jewish people come from the tribe of Judah. That's where we get the word Jew, is from the tribe of Judah. But Judah was only one of the 12 tribes. So he is telling Ezekiel, this vision you've seen, this regathering, this great, exceeding great army that rises up, is resurrected, that's restored. These bones are the whole house of Israel, not just the Jews only, but the whole house of Israel. All the other tribes as well. And to clarify it even more, right after this, in the very same chapter, he says, the word of Yahweh came again unto me, saying, Moreover, thou son of man, take thee one stick, and write upon it, for Judah and for the children of Israel, his companions. Then take another stick and write upon it, for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and for all the house of Israel, his companions. And join them one to another into one stick, and they shall become one in thine hand. And when the children of thy people shall speak unto thee, saying, Wilt thou not show us what thou meanest by these? Say unto them, Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, Behold, I will take the stick of Joseph, which is in the hand of Ephraim, and the tribes of Israel his fellows, and will put them with him, even with the stick of Judah, and make them one stick, and they shall be one in mine hand. And the sticks whereon thou writest shall be in thine hand before their eyes. And say unto them, Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, Behold, I will take the children of Israel from among the heathen whither they be gone, and will gather them on every side, and bring them into their own land. And I will make them one nation in the land upon the mountains of Israel, and one king shall be king to them all. And they shall be no more two nations, neither shall they be divided into two kingdoms any more at all. Neither shall they defile themselves any more with their idols, nor with their detestable things, nor with any of their transgressions, but I will save them out of all their dwelling places wherein they have sinned, and will cleanse them, so they shall be my people, and I will be their God. And David, my servant, shall be king over them, and they shall all have one shepherd. They shall also walk in my judgments and observe my statutes to do them. Now the two sticks here are the two houses of Israel, namely Judah and Israel, or Judah and Ephraim. The stick of Judah represents the Jewish people. The other stick, it basically represents all the other tribes. It's sometimes called the stick of Ephraim, stick of Joseph, stick of Israel. Now, maybe this is all new to you. Maybe you're wondering, what in the world are you talking about? These two becoming one. Okay, that's what I hope to clarify today. To understand what this is all talking about, and to understand what the apostles were talking about in Acts 15, you have to understand three Old Testament events. You have to be aware of what happened. First of all, you have to know that Israel, the 12-tribe kingdom of Israel, was divided into two kingdoms, or two houses, after the death of King Solomon. The 10 tribes in the north split off from the tribe of Judah and Benjamin in the south. So you have to understand that. The 10 tribes seceded from the house of Judah. Second thing you have to understand is the exile of those 10 tribes in the north, that they were taken away by the Assyrians, carried off, and then they were scattered, and they were assimilated, they intermarried, they assimilated. Eventually, the 10 tribes were absorbed into the Gentile world. Where is the tribe of Reuben today? Where's the tribe of Gad? Where's the tribe of Naphtali? Where's the tribe of Asher? Where did these tribes go? They intermarried. Their descendants are out there, but they don't have a tribal identity anymore. So you need to understand the kingdom was divided. The northern 10 tribes were exiled. The Jewish people, they too were carried off into Babylon, some about 150 years later. They were carried into Babylon, but only for 70 years. They retained their tribal identity, and at the end of the 70 years captivity in Babylon, they were allowed to return back to the land, back to the territory of Judea, and so they always retained their tribal identity, unlike the 10 tribes that were assimilated. So three things you need to understand: Israel's division into 2 kingdoms, the exile of the 10 northern tribes and their assimilation, and the third thing, and maybe the most important thing, is the prophet's declaration that those 2 houses, those 2 kingdoms, will someday be brought back together. That's what the fallen Tabernacle of David is, because when David ruled as king, it was over all 12 tribes. David ruled over a united 12-tribe monarchy. And then after David died, King Solomon, it was still all 12 tribes during Solomon's time, but after Solomon died, it split into 2. Now, how did it happen? Okay, Solomon's pagan wives turned his heart away from the Lord. You can read this in the book of Kings. And Solomon had a servant named Jeroboam. And one day this prophet named Ahijah, he comes up to Jeroboam, servant of Solomon, and Ahijah had a garment, and he tore it into 12 pieces, handed 10 pieces to Jeroboam and said, "Take thee 10 pieces, for thus saith Yahweh God of Israel, behold, I will rend or tear the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon and give 10 tribes to thee." So the prophet Ahijah told him, just like I tore this robe in 12 pieces, you take 10 pieces, you're getting 10 tribes of Israel. You're going to rule and reign over 10 of the tribes. Now, it didn't happen right away. It didn't happen until after Solomon was dead, because Solomon heard about it and wanted to kill Jeroboam. So Jeroboam fled to Egypt, and then after the death of Solomon, he came back. And it was after that then the 10 tribes seceded after the death of Solomon. They broke away from Judah, just like Ahijah had prophesied. And so Jeroboam reigned as king over those 10 tribes. And those 10 tribes became known as collectively as Israel, or sometimes Ephraim, because Ephraim was the largest of the territory there, the most numerous. And sometimes the 10 northern tribes are simply called Joseph, because Joseph was the father of Ephraim. So sometimes called Israel, sometimes Joseph, sometimes Israel. And so that's how it happened. And then, as I said, they were carried off by the Assyrians, transplanted in a foreign country, and eventually intermarried and assimilated into the Gentile world. And you can read about this in Kings and Chronicles. You can read all about these things. And then, as I said, about 135 years later, or something like that, the Jews were conquered by Babylon, carried away into Babylon, but they retained their tribal identity. Now, it can get a little confusing at times. It can get a little confusing because sometimes Israel is referring to Jewish people. Sometimes it includes Jewish people. Sometimes it does not. Because all Jews are Israelites, but not all Israelites are Jews. Just like we would say, all sparrows are birds, but not all birds are sparrows. So sometimes Israel includes the Jewish people. Sometimes it's just talking specifically about the northern tribes. So it can get a little confusing, but usually the context will clarify it. Now, this is called, commonly some people call this whole thing, the teaching of the 2 houses of Israel. It can get a little controversial because there's some extremism, there's some fanaticism, and there's some misrepresentation of what people are actually saying. And I hope to bring some sanity to this whole topic here. Now, the fact that the 10 tribes, we know from the Bible, that the 10 tribes were carried away. Okay, that's a historical fact that no Bible believer can argue with. The 10 tribes were carried away by the Assyrians. and they intermarried, and they were assimilated, they were absorbed. And therefore, we can say that there has to be a large percentage of the Gentile world population that has some Israelite ancestry. Okay? There have to be people out there who have some Israelite ancestry. Second point, the prophet said the 10 northern tribes would be reunited with Judah someday. And we look at the church today. The church is made up primarily of Gentiles, and some of those Gentiles no doubt have Israelite ancestry. It doesn't matter if it's only 1% or 99%. Just numerically speaking, there have to be some descendants of the tribes among of all the Gentiles throughout history who have come to Israel's Messiah through faith in Jesus. There have to be some who have Israelite ancestry. And the farther we go in history, the more it's going to be because people reproduce. Therefore, the Gentiles coming into the Messianic faith, joining with Jewish believers, this is the one new man that Paul is talking about, and this is also the fulfillment of the prophet's declaration that the house of Judah and the house of Israel would someday be reunited. So that is in a nutshell, is what is commonly called the two-house teaching. Now, question is it true? Well, I've got a newsletter here from a well-known Jewish believer. He's got a question and answer page. Somebody writes to him, "Can you please tell me if you think the two-house theology has any scriptural foundation? Do you believe it is important for all believers to adhere to following and observing the Torah?" Here's this Messianic Jewish brother's answer. The whole Ephraim Heresy, he gets right to the point there, the whole Ephraim Heresy is simply a reworking of the old British Israelite theory with a different twist, but it is just as wrong and just as unhistorical as it can be. It presupposes that there are 10 lost tribes of Israel, but these were never lost. And the doctrine makes many other presuppositions and faulty exegesis that are simply not true. It is simply a movement of a group of Jewish wannabes, but has no historical validity, and even worse, it has no exegetical validity of any biblical text. It is one of those new movements that seem to have become prominent among different groups who want to claim Jewish origins or Israelite origins. It is a recently discovered truth that nobody else knew for 2,000 years. Getting involved with that will take you away from the Bible and not to it, so you can safely ignore that whole cultic element. Here's another well-known Messianic Jewish brother. Asks, where do you fall on the two tribes teaching? His answer is, the two tribes or two-house theory is unbiblical in that it confuses Israel with the church and tries to make Gentiles to be Israel or Ephraim. There is no credible historical evidence to support this bizarre version of replacement theology. Okay, so this is how some Messianic Jewish brothers view this whole teaching. Now, is it true that some are just Jewish wannabes? Yes, that's true. There are some people that are just Jewish wannabes. But the majority of people I know are not just Jewish wannabes. And are there extremism? Yes, there are people who embrace this teaching and drift into white supremacy, but that's not us. These people, a lot of times people, they'll look at the fringe, the fanatics on the fringes, and they'll look at them as the representatives of the whole movement, the whole group, the whole organization. They'll point to the fanatics and the crackpots and the kooks, the granola bar, fruits and nuts and flakes, and they'll say, see, that's what those people are like. Well, all the people aren't like that. So here's some things to consider. And instead of looking at the crazies, let's just see what the Bible says. Because isn't that, if we're Bible believers, then we ought to be looking to the Bible to tell us whether or not this is true. So we know it's a biblical fact that the 10 tribes were scattered and assimilated. And we'll look at that later. It's also a biblical fact that the 10 northern tribes were to become goyim, nations, Gentiles, plural. As a matter of fact, you can go all the way back into Genesis chapter 48. Here when Jacob is prophesying over Joseph's two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. This is Genesis 48:19. This is when Joseph brought his two sons so Jacob could put his hands upon them and bless them. And he brought, obviously, the right hand is the preferred hand of honor. So he brought his firstborn on this side of Jacob, so Jacob's right hand would be upon the older son, Manasseh. And so, remember the story, Jacob wittingly crossed his hand so that his right hand would be upon the younger son, Ephraim. And it says, Joseph said to his father, "Not so, my father, for this is the firstborn, put thy right hand upon his head." And his father refused and said, "I know it, my son, I know it. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. But truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations," plural, goyim. So he says, Ephraim, his seed, his descendants, will become a multitude of nations, plural. So a biblical fact that the 10 northern tribes were scattered, assimilated, absorbed, and they became goyim. They became Gentiles. Third biblical fact is that the prophet said the descendants of the 10 northern tribes would someday somehow be reunited with Judah, just like in Ezekiel's vision of the two sticks coming together. So the only question really is this. Is this reuniting coming about by Gentiles coming to Israel's Messiah? Is the fulfillment of this prophecy coming about because the Gentiles are coming to Israel's Messiah? Now, are there descendants among the 10 northern tribes among the Gentiles coming to the Messiah? Well, obviously, yes, because just numbers-wise. I read an article some years back in the newspaper, just a secular newspaper, about ancestry and genealogy. And these experts said that, just statistically speaking, just on pure statistics, they said if you could go back in time 3,000 years, any place on the planet, they said the first person you saw would almost certainly be one of your ancestors. That's how closely connected we are. Just 3,000 years. You're going to have a connection to just about anybody. You don't have to go back that many thousands of years to have a connection. So theoretically, just about anybody, statistically speaking, could be descended from the tribes, from Abraham. Now, I'm not convinced of this because I read some book about it. I'm convinced because of Hosea's prophecy. Hosea talks about this, and then Peter and Paul in the New Testament quote from Hosea's prophecy and tell Gentile Christians that the fulfillment of Hosea's prophecy is being fulfilled by Gentiles coming to faith in Israel's Messiah. If we look at Hosea Chapter 1, Hosea was told to take a harlot, Gomer, and then she had 3 children, and the Lord himself told Hosea what to call those 3 children, what names to give them. And the names he gave them, the first one he named Jezreel. Now, if you look at it in Hebrew, it's Yisrael. Sounds almost like Yisrael, but it's a little different, Yisrael. And if you look at the name, you'll see that the yod prefix means he will. Well, first look at the center part, the zara, the root of the word. If it's a noun, it means seed. If it's a verb, it means scatter. Then the yod prefix means he will. So he will scatter, Yisrael. And then the El, of course, is short for Elohim. So Yisrael means God will scatter like seed, because he's prophetically saying, this is the fate of the 10 northern tribes. I'm going to scatter them like seed among the Gentiles, among the nations. And then the second child was a daughter. He said, call her name Lo Ruhama. Ruhama means comfort, peace, and so forth, mercy. He says in verse 6, call her name Lo Ruhama, for I will no more have mercy upon the house of Israel, but I will utterly take them away. So he says, I'm going to no longer have pity upon her. But notice he says in the next verse, he says, but I will have mercy upon the house of Judah. So he's making a distinction here. He's making sure that they understand, don't think that Judah is included in this. This is specifically talking about the 10 northern tribes, not the southern tribe of Judah. I'll have mercy on Judah and save them by Yahweh their God. Then the third son is said, call his name Lo Ami, which means not my people. Am is people. You put a yod at the end of Am, it makes it my people. Lo Ami. He says, verse 9, call his name Lo Ami, for ye are not my people, and I will not be your God. Okay? So keep in mind, this is what's going on. So these three children of Hosea are making a prophetic declaration of the destiny, the fate of the 10 northern tribes. They're to be scattered like seed among the Gentiles, which happened when the Assyrians carried them away. They are to be unpitied, and then they are to be disowned by God. He says, you are not my people. But the story doesn't end there, because the very next verse, verse 10, he says, yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured nor numbered. So he's saying, I scatter them like seed among the Gentiles, but they're not all going to die off, because what happens when you scatter seed? It doesn't all die. Some of it takes root and grows and reproduces, and that seed reproduces more and more and more until it's going to be like the sand of the sea. It's going to be this vast multitude of people like the sand of the sea that you can't even count the number of descendants from the 10 tribes. And that's still not the end of the story, because there's a destiny for the descendants of the 10 tribes. The rest of the verse says, and it shall come to pass that in the place where it was said unto them, ye are not my people, there it shall be said unto them, ye are the sons of the living God. So you see what he's saying here? The Lord is telling Hosea that they're going to be scattered like seed, then they're going to multiply like the sand of the sea, and at some point in the future, they will be again reclaimed as sons of the living God. Who are the sons of God? Who is God reclaiming as sons of God? Where are these descendants of the tribes? Who does God call his sons? Who are called sons of God? Well, you go to the New Testament, it's believers in Yeshua. And then in the next verse says, then shall the children of Judah and the children of Israel be gathered together, just like Ezekiel's 2 sticks gathered together, just like in Acts 15, the Jewish believers and the Gentile believers being joined together and appoint themselves one head, that's the Messiah, King Messiah, Melech HaMashiach, and they shall come up out of the land, for great shall be the day of Jezreel. This is going to be a great time. See, you have to just look at some things, look at some points that, and keep in mind, Peter and Paul quote from this prophecy and tell Gentile Christians the prophecy is being fulfilled by them coming in. And that James quoted from Amos's prophecy and connected to the Gentiles coming. You know, you just have to look at simple things like pronouns and antecedents. If you look at verse 10, it says, in the place where it was said to them, okay, who are them? Just go back. Pronouns have to have antecedents. Them are the children of Israel, the descendants of the children of Israel. It will be said to the descendants of the children of Israel, you are not my people. There it shall be said unto them, the children of Israel, the descendants of the 10 tribes, you are the sons of the living God. And then if you go to Romans 9, verse 24, Paul says, even us whom he hath called, not of the Jews only, but also of the Gentiles. As he saith also in Hosea, I will call them. What's the antecedent of the pronoun them? Go back to the previous verse. Gentiles. I will call them my people, which were not my people, and her beloved, which was not beloved. And it shall come to pass in the place where it was said unto them, who? Gentiles. You are not my people, there shall they be called the children of the living God. So Gentiles are fulfilling Hosea's prophecy concerning the innumerable descendants of the 10 lost tribes. And Peter also, in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9, Peter writing to strangers, aliens, Christians, is one of the few, I think there's only 2 or 3 places where the word Christian appears in the New Testament, and one of them is here in 1 Peter. So Peter is telling strangers, aliens, Christians, he says in verse 9, but ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people, that you should show forth the praises of him who hath called you out of darkness into his marvelous light, which in time past were not a people, lo ami, but are now the people of God, which had not obtained mercy, lo ruchama, but now have obtained mercy. So you see, Peter is quoting from Hosea's prophecy too. So both Peter and Paul connect Gentile Christians with the fulfillment of Hosea's prophecy that the innumerable descendants of the 10 lost tribes, that they're going to be reunited with the house of Judah, and it's going to come about by them coming through the Messiah Yeshua, coming back into Israel by coming to Israel's Messiah. So again, Acts 15, where where James quoted here from Amos, where he says, "After this I will return and will build again the tabernacle of David, which is fallen." What was the fallen tabernacle of David? It was the dividing of the 12-tribe kingdom. And he's saying the promise is that that divided kingdom is going to be reunited. The fallen Sukkah of David is going to be rebuilt, and it's going to come about through the Gentiles coming in, because where are the descendants of the 10 tribes? They're among the Gentiles. And it doesn't necessarily mean that every single Gentile Christian has Israelite ancestry, but it means that some of them do, and that the most significant thing means that it's through the Gentiles coming in. That is how the prophet's declaration is being fulfilled. The prophet Amos, the prophet Ezekiel, that this is how it's happening. If we go to Amos, now the book of Amos is primarily about the 10 northern tribes. You find the word Samaria, which was the capital of the 10-tribe kingdom, Bethel, which was where Jeroboam set up the golden calf, and he talks about captivity. Okay, Amos 3:1, "Hear this word that Yahweh hath spoken against you, O children of Israel, against the whole family which I brought up from the land of Egypt." So notice, this is spoken not just to the house of Judah, he says, against the whole family. The whole family means all 12 tribes. And then one of the things he says to the whole family is this. In chapter 9, verse 8 of Amos, he says, "Behold, the eyes of the Lord Yahweh are upon the sinful kingdom, and I will destroy it from off the face of the earth. Saving that I will not utterly destroy the house of Jacob, saith Yahweh. For lo, I will command, and I will sift the house of Israel among all nations, like as corn is sifted in a sieve. Yet shall not the least grain fall upon the earth." So he's saying that he's going to sift them. And then we come to verse 11. He says, "In that day will I raise up the tabernacle of David that is fallen, and close up the breaches thereof, and I will raise up his ruins, and I will build it as in the days of old." So this is where the promise is, "that they may possess the remnant of Edom and all the heathen," or Gentiles, "which are called by my name, saith Yahweh, that doeth this." So this was the passage that helped the apostles understand where Gentiles fit into the whole plan of God, into this messianic movement, into this community, the fallen Sukkah, all 12 tribes. And it's interesting that if you look at David Stern's Jewish New Testament commentary, when he comments on Acts 15, he says this. David Stern writes, "The complete fulfillment of Amos's prophecy will take place when the undivided realm of King David's time is restored. Meanwhile, this is a beginning." Now, I don't know where David Stern stands on all the whole two-house thing, but even David Stern acknowledges that this is a beginning, that the fallen tabernacle of David is referring to the 12-tribe monarchy under one king, all 12 tribes being reunited, and that it's beginning to happen. It's a beginning because the Gentiles are coming in. This is the beginning. And that beginning took place almost 2,000 years ago, and it's been going on, and more Gentiles have been coming to the faith. Now, how much of the details the apostles understood, I'm not certain. How much they really understood. Yeshua said, "It's not for you to know the times or the seasons." You know, they may not have understood all the details, but they did understand this. They understood that David's united 12-tribe monarchy was going to be re-established, and it was that re-establishing, that building up again of David's fallen tabernacle was going to come about as a result of Gentiles coming into the faith. It's going to be through Gentiles coming into the faith that David's fallen tabernacle is going to be raised up. And you remember the last question the apostles asked Yeshua on this earth. In Acts 1:6, they said, Lord, will you at this time restore the kingdom to Israel? Now notice they didn't ask him, Lord, will you at this time restore the territory of Judea to the Jews? Now their hopes included Judea and the Jews, but their hopes were not limited to just the tribe of Judah. Their hopes were for the whole house of Israel, for all 12 tribes, because they understood that one of the jobs of the Messiah when he comes is to reunite all 12 tribes, regather all 12 tribes, and rule as king over all 12 tribes, just like Ezekiel said, just like Amos said, just like the other prophets were hoping for. They were all looking forward to this restoration of all 12 tribes under one king. And they knew Yeshua's the king, he's the Messiah. They were just not sure, are you going to do it now that you've raised from the dead? He said, it's not for you to know the times or seasons, but you get filled with the Holy Spirit and be my witnesses. Now you might be thinking, well, yeah, but why is all this important? So what? Well, when a Christian sees that his faith in Israel's Messiah makes him a part of Israel, that will change how he views himself and how he views the commandments of God. Because keep in mind, if you're a part of Israel, then Israel's blessings are for you, and you're not taking them away from anybody, by the way. God has plenty of blessings to go around. You're not stealing anybody's inheritance. So Israel's blessings are for you, and the promises are for you, but also the obligations are for you. The commandments are for you. And Paul the Apostle in Ephesians chapter 2, just consider what Paul is saying here. He says in chapter 2, verse 11 of Ephesians, he says, wherefore remember that ye, being in time past Gentiles in the flesh. Notice he says, your Gentile status, it's a thing of the past. You may be a Gentile biologically, genealogically. You may be of 100% pagan ancestry. You know, none of us really know. But even if you're of 100% pagan ancestry, you know what? Your Gentile status, as far as God is concerned, it's a thing of the past. Just as much as Rahab, as Ruth, as anybody else that left their heathen ways behind and joined themselves to Israel, they became a part of Israel. He says, you being in time past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision by that which is called the circumcision, in the flesh made by hands, that at that time ye were without Messiah. Again, past tense, you were without the Messiah, being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel. It's in the past. Your alienation from the commonwealth of Israel, your status as an outsider, it's past. You're now part of the commonwealth of Israel. Strangers from the covenants of promise, that's something of the past. Having no hope and without God in the world, but now in Messiah Yeshua, you who sometimes were far off are made nigh by the blood of Messiah, for he is our peace, who hath made both one, both sticks, both houses. He has made both one. Gentile believers who are descended from the 10 tribes, not necessarily all of them, but some of them, and the house of Judah. And that's maybe where the companions comes in. You know, those that join themselves to Judah, those that maybe they are of 100% pagan ancestry, but they've joined themselves to Ephraim, to Israel, that we are all joined together to become this one new man. He is our peace, who has broken down the middle wall. He has made both one, has broken down the middle wall of partition between us. So we are all on the same ground. We're all of one people. He says he's abolished the flesh, abolished in his flesh the enmity. So he reconciles both together into one body, one new man, and the Messiah is the head of that body. He is the king. So you have to understand that if you believe in Israel's Messiah, Jesus, even if you call him Jesus instead of Yeshua, if you believe in him, he's Israel's Messiah, and according to Paul the Apostle, you are a part of Israel, whether you like it or not. Even if you're an anti-Semite, if you believe in Jesus, you're part of Israel, like it or not. That means Israel's blessings are for you, but also Israel's obligations are for you, including the Torah. You know, Paul said to Gentiles in Romans 11:11, he said that one job of Gentile believers is to provoke the Jewish people to jealousy. See, we are supposed to live in such a way that provokes Jews to jealousy. Now, historically, unfortunately, the church has just provoked Jews, not to jealousy, but just provoked them, persecuted them. But we are supposed to be living in such a way, have such a close connection to God, so much of the blessing of God, so much of the joy of the Lord, so much of God's favor, that the Jewish people are supposed to be provoked and motivated to say, these Gentile Christians, they've got something that I don't have. And whatever it is they have, I want. Now, how are we to provoke the Jews to jealousy if we have a theology that just throws out the Sabbath and say Sabbath isn't important? We're going to go to church on Sunday instead. And we're going to just go shopping and do yard work on Saturdays, treat it as a common day. Or we're going to throw out the dietary laws. We're going to have a church hog roast. That, how is that going to provoke a Jew to jealousy? Now, it may provoke some Jews to jealousy if they don't care about their faith, they don't care about the Bible, they don't care about God. They're just looking for some reason, some excuse to do those things. But for a Jew who takes his Bible seriously, who takes his faith seriously, who takes his identity as a Jew seriously, is he going to be provoked to jealousy if we say, come on over to church on Sunday and have a ham and cheese sandwich to show us you really love Jesus? That's really not going to provoke very many Jews to jealousy. See, one thing we have to keep in mind is that if you believe in Israel's Messiah, you're a part of Israel. Notice that in that vision that Ezekiel had, these bones are the whole house of Israel, and then the two sticks. Did you notice in Ezekiel's vision of the two sticks, there was no stick with the word Gentile written on it? It was Israel and Judah. No stick for the Gentiles. The Gentiles have to be included with the companions for the house of Joseph, Ephraim, and his companions. And somebody once said the 12 gates of the New Jerusalem has the names of the 12 tribes. If you want to enter into the New Jerusalem, guess what? You have to pass through one of those 12 gates. There is no gate for Gentiles in the New Jerusalem. There's only 12 gates for the 12 tribes of Israel. You're going to have to pass through one of those gates. And another important thing to remember is that you can't be a part of the new covenant if you're a Gentile. Do you know that? I've had Christian people say to me, well, you're doing all this Torah stuff, you keep the Sabbath and that stuff, but I'm a Gentile Christian. I'm under the new covenant. I'm a Gentile under the new covenant. I say, wait a minute. A Gentile under the new covenant. Let's see who that new covenant is made with. You can go to Jeremiah 31:31, or if you just want to go to the New Testament, let's look at it in the New Testament, which quotes from Jeremiah 31:31. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. Period. God doesn't make a new covenant with Gentiles. I tell Gentiles, how can you say you're a part of the new covenant when the new covenant isn't made with Gentiles? The new covenant's only made with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. So how can you be a part of the new covenant? How can you say you're under the new covenant when you're not, if you're not a part of the house of Israel or the part of Judah? It would be as if I made a covenant with two families. If I said, I'm going to make an agreement to do certain things for these two families, family of Smith and the family of Jones. And somebody comes to me and said, hey, I want to get in on this. I want to be a part of this agreement. And I say, okay, is your name Smith or Jones? And they say, well, neither one. My name's Johnson. I have to say, well, I'm sorry, Johnson. This covenant's not for you. This covenant's just for people that are in the family of Smith or in the family of Jones. So you don't have any claim to this unless you can find a legal way to get yourself into the family of Smith or into the family of Jones. And then you'll automatically be a part of the covenant. You can find a legal way either through marriage or through adoption. You find a legal way to get yourself into the family of Smith or Jones, and you'll automatically be part of the new covenant. And see, that is the only basis that a Gentile has for claiming to be under the new covenant, is to say that through faith in Israel's Messiah, I legally obtain the status of an Israelite. Otherwise, as a Gentile, if you still think of yourself as a Gentile, if you still identify as a Gentile spiritually, if you think you're something separate from Israel, you've got no claim whatsoever to the new covenant. To have any claim to the new covenant, you've got to be a part of the house of Israel or the house of Judah. And this is the same covenant. Yeshua, on the Last Supper, he said, this is my blood of the new covenant. Same covenant. And this is not about stealing anybody's inheritance, because God has plenty of blessings to go around. It's not about replacement theology, as Scott Diffenderfer pointed out. It's inclusion theology. We're not replacing anybody. Somebody wants to accuse me of replacement theology. I say, who am I replacing? Show me the person. Where's the Jew that I'm replacing? I'm not replacing anybody. If somebody gets adopted into a family, they don't replace anybody. They're just simply added to the family. And so we are not replacing anybody. This is not replacement theology. It is inclusion theology. Now, one more final point. We've got a few minutes left here. One final point to make about this in regards to this whole teaching is that Orthodox Jews know that the 10 tribes have to someday somehow be reconnected and rejoined to Israel. Now, they expect the descendants of the 10 tribes to convert to Judaism. They don't expect these Jesus-believing Messianics to be the fulfillment, unless we just deny our faith in Jesus and convert to Judaism. But they understand that the 10 tribes are somehow going to be reconnected to the house of Judah. And I don't have time, but I could show you, some quotes from rabbinical writings where they talk about that. How are the tribes going to be identified? There are some people in this movement, they start studying about the tribes, and they think, I think I must be a part of this tribe or that tribe because I've got characteristics like, I must be a Reubenite because Reuben, he committed sexual immorality, and boy, I struggle with that temptation. Well, most people do, to be honest. So you don't need to try and figure out which tribe you're going to be. As a matter of fact, according to the rabbis, they say that when Yeshua comes, well, they don't say when Yeshua comes back. They say when the Messiah comes. When the Messiah comes, they say, he will point out, he will tell this person belongs to this tribe, that person belongs to that tribe. In other words, he will designate which person belongs to which tribe. That's what the rabbis believe and teach. So don't get too hung up on trying to figure out which tribe, because some people, they think, well, boy, if I'm from one of the tribes, how will I know which gate to go through in the New Jerusalem? Don't worry about it. If you don't know, the Lord or somebody will explain. We don't need to worry about these things. But be encouraged, because this is not about replacement theology. It's inclusion theology. Don't look at the crackpots and the fanatics. Just understand that, as I said, biblical facts. The 10 tribes were carried away, they intermarried, they assimilated, they were absorbed into the Gentile world. Biblical fact that God said he would do it. The 3 children of Hosea, Jezreel, I will scatter like seed. He will scatter like seed. God will scatter like seed. Lo Ruhama, they'll be unpitied. Lo Ami, they will be not my people, disowned as a people, and yet they will reproduce, they will multiply like the sand of the sea. And in the place where it was said, you are not my people, it will someday be said, you are the sons of the living God. And that's what's been happening since Yeshua came to this earth, died as a sacrifice for our sins, rose from the dead, ascended. That's when the regathering started. As Gentiles have been coming in, it started with the house of Cornelius. There they were, still Gentiles, but God-fearers. God-fearers, they were not raw pagans, they were not idolaters. God-fearers were people in the synagogue, keeping Shabbat. They were basically living like a Jew, except they just had not taken the final step of circumcision, and then mikveh, baptism, and then offering a sacrifice at the temple. So the restoration of all things, it began there with the house of Cornelius, coming to faith in Israel's Messiah, being accepted as full-fledged members of the Messianic community. As Peter said, when he and the other Jewish believers with him, when they saw them filled with the Holy Spirit, speak in tongues, prophesy, they said they received the Holy Spirit in the same manner as us, with the same obvious evidence as us. Can any man forbid water? So they're going to mikvah them, even though they're still uncircumcised physically, because their hearts were circumcised. So God demonstrated by divine supernatural intervention, he demonstrated their hearts are circumcised. They can be immersed, they can be put in the mikvah, and they are now to be accepted as full-fledged members of the Commonwealth of Israel. So if you think of yourself as a Gentile, you don't need to think of yourself as a Gentile. Even if you've got pagan ancestry, it doesn't matter. You know, what God looks at is the heart. If you come to him through the sacrifice of his Son, you identify as his disciple, you are a part of Israel. Don't let anybody tell you that you're not a part of Israel. You're just as much a part of Israel as Rahab was, as Ruth was, as all the other unnamed Gentiles over the years that joined themselves to the people of Israel, to the God of Israel, and said, I'm done with my pagan ways. I'm not going to get into that heathen worship any longer. I'm going to devote myself to the God of Israel and live according to his commandments. And I'm going to believe in his Son, the Messiah, Yeshua of Nazareth. And I'm going to follow him all the days of my life. You are an Israelite indeed. Thank you for your time. Shalom.